it really helps with that PTSD because I'm working with my hands. And that really what it came down to. I felt more at peace working with my hands with wood than I've done with any other thing.
Some of us go to counselors for therapy. Some of us go to psychologists. But Josh Buettner, he went to art, woodworking art for his therapy. Mm-hmm. And his art started him a business.
Yes. And then we also have our newsletter. That's votw.substack.com. That's where we just have stories and kind of information and stuff we're learning. And so if you haven't checked that out, please do that. And this is Josh Buettner.
I've done woodworking for as long as I can remember, but 2x4s and plywood with my dad is a far cry from fine art. And so I had all the basic knowledge, and so I joined the Army National Guard month before I graduated high school. Day after graduation, I shipped out to basic training, and then that kind of started that. I went to college for a couple of years, and then did not get into pharmacy school. I was pre-pharmacy.
Okay, so college for pharmaceutical.
Yep, I didn't get accepted to pharmacy school over at UW. My GPA was too low, and that's fine.
Which is pretty common for
it's a very
folks
very
like us.
hard school to get into, and so the PCAT score, pharmacy college admission test, I had a 96, and the average score that they took was a 95.
Oh wow! Okay.
And so I just was not as diligent of a student as I should have been, unfortunately. And then so as far as my Army career goes, I deployed 06, 07 to Iraq, and then came back, met my wife, and then in 9 and 10, I went back over for my second time, and that was in
So you
Kuwait.
got married while you were in the Army.
Yep. And so he was born in November. We left in April, so I mean a 5-month-old. That was hard. And then came back. We had our second kid, our daughter, and then I went back to school from 10 to 14, graduated with my associates in wildlife and fisheries biology and management.
Really? Okay.
So it's a mouthful. I double majored, so I graduated with honors because of that.
So you're going to be an outdoorsman.
I have always been very avid outdoorsman, camping, hunting, fishing. I love doing that kind of stuff. And so I was a non-traditional student. And so I was in my 30s and mortgage, car payment, wife, 2 kids. And so during the summers, I was not able to do internships like my cohorts were doing. And so I didn't have that knowledge and that work experience to get me into some of those positions. And so I graduated December 14, and then in March of 15, I took a job as tech supply for the Army Aviation Support Facility. I was ordering $500,000 engines, 200,000 main rotor blades, any part in the Black Hawk helicopters.
Fun.
And so I did that. And then I also, I had originally started as logistics in my military career, and then I transitioned into hydraulics. And so once I was doing hydraulics, I deployed my last deployment in 16 and 17. And it's crazy to think here in a couple months, it's going to be my 10-year anniversary of going back over to the pond. And so I came back, and unfortunately, my PTSD manifested.
Hey, I don't want to when we first said this, I was like, how do I say? I don't want to ask you things you don't want to be asked.
No.
But I feel like when you say PTSD, a lot of people are struggling with PTSD, especially from the military.
Yeah.
How much do you want to go into that? What do you want to talk about?
We can talk briefly about it. And so we were out at Crystal Lake, west of town, and it was June of 17, and I was thinking to myself, because we were out there fishing, and I made the realization that it was 10 years ago, and then things just over-flooded me. I watched the truck get blown up in front of me in October of July 5th. Early in the morning, we were rocketed. Rocket hit about 150 yards away from us. So, and that's a couple of the things that we've seen, and it just came back. as just the floodgates were opened up. And then
What did that feel like? And again, you don't have to.
Yeah,
you don't have
yeah.
to go
No,
there.
you're
but,
good. You're good.
But for those
Just,
who are, understanding this journey here,
sheer panic attack. Just and that was literally my first real panic attack. Everybody's got anxiety. It's a common place. You got a paper due, or you're a little bit behind on the rent. It's like, okay, how are we going to do this? And so anxiety is normal, but it was just sheer hopelessness. Wow. And then I started having dreams because of that rocket attack. We were in a warehouse, and it was 1:30, 2 in the morning, something like that. And when that rocket hit, it shook the building, but it was too much for me. And so I ended up getting medically retired, I should say. And so then it was, well, what do I do? And so we had bought this house right before I retired because it was easier to get a loan with a pay stub than a retirement statement.
How did it feel to? How did it feel that? I mean, your career is kind of stripped from you because of your body. Yourself, your anxiety. We don't always have control over these things,
right?
How, as you're processing that, that transition, how did that? What was going on in your head?
It was definitely somewhat of a relief.
Okay.
Because I was working every day, there was a constant fear of something happening to my mechanics that I worked with. And it was just getting overwhelming. And so ultimately I was retired.
So it was just a relief to get out of what was causing or perpetuating or something.
Yes, yeah, and that's a really good way to put it. And so, it was a matter of I got out. We just moved here, and then so I retired August 31st of 19, and then less than 3 weeks later, I was having emergency back surgery. I had a 27 millimeter bulge, so 1 1/16 between L5 and S1. I could not feel my left leg.
Did you have any idea of this before? Or
I mean, you're in the Army, you're rucksacking with 40 pounds, and so that was my early, days in basic and whatnot. But, just the constant jumping in and out of trucks and whatnot, there's a lot of folks with bad backs that have been in the military. Yeah. And so luckily, we had the house. I had just been retired from the Army. I had my emergency back surgery. I had several months to where I could just veg and recuperate.
Because you've got something from the military covering this.
Yes. And
so thankfully, you didn't have to just get back up and run.
Yes. Yeah. And then it became a point where, what am I going to do with my time? I literally was twiddling my thumbs forward and backwards, and that lasted 5 minutes.
Yeah, you can only do that for so long.
You can only do it for so long. Yeah, absolutely. And so then we started making wood and epoxy cribbage boards.
Okay, so let's talk about, there's a transition here.
That's all right, the transition point.
You've been relieved of probably what was the only thing you knew as a career, all your friends, all your community. So there's the mental part of that too, the anxiety. And then you've got a back that just says, forget about it.
Yep.
You just talked about your knees. Mm-hmm. And when you're sitting in that spot going, what should I do with my life? Your choice was cribbage boards. I just want to go into that a little bit. Why did you choose art? Why wood? Why didn't you just say, hey, I'll just work at Walmart?
So I have my bachelor's degree in wildlife management, but with bad knees and back, I can't go and wrangle and trap pronghorn and elk. So then the thought was, I don't want to work for anybody. I don't, and so I wanted to be retired.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. And I've got my Army retirement. And so luckily that pays the bills. And then, so it's like, what do I want to do for fun? I didn't need to go back and work.
And I really want to slow down on this part because there's a lot of people
Yes.
who are going, they're in your position. They're saying, I don't know what I want to do with my life. And what's next? You were able to find some sort of purpose, something that you wanted to do. And again, you did cribbage. It sounds like because you liked cribbage boards.
Yes.
You liked cribbage. But why, again, and you could do whatever was fun to you, but can we dig into that anymore? Why did you choose to do something that you loved? What was behind that?
Yeah, so I've got several other hobbies. I am a huge Legos guy.
Nice.
Especially Star Wars Legos. I've loved them. And I did briefly. I built a Star Wars Mandalorian costume, a bounty hunter.
You could have sold those as your business.
But that's just it. And and I've painted guns. I've built guns before.
Okay. Another potential.
Yep. So, and then I've got the Mustangs. We got 4 of them out there. And so there's a lot of different things I could have done.
You're great with your hands, it seems. You're pretty talented.
The costuming, I was very late to the game.
Okay.
I mean, there's already people out there with established names. And
so you looked at that as a potential?
I looked at it and ultimately it was just too tedious. It was a fun hobby for me to do at the time, but it wasn't a fit.
Okay.
And guns, I love guns. I love shooting. I've painted multiple different guns with camo, but still, there's not as much of a need in there. So
this wasn't as much of a passion decision. These just felt like business decisions. I don't think that's going to work.
And it really, truly is both.
Okay.
And so I love doing what I do, and ultimately, you have to get rid of stuff if you're continuously bringing it in. Mm-hmm. And so I do it for fun, like I mentioned, and it really helps with that PTSD because I'm working with my hands, and that really what it came down to. I felt more at peace working with my hands with wood than I've done with any other thing.
Oh, okay. There it is.
And that's really the key. And so
had you been working with wood before you did the cribbage boards?
Yeah. I mean, my wife and I, we did reclaimed pallet crafts and that's really what it was. And so, we had a couple of the tools, but so we started doing the cribbage boards late in 19, and then in February of 20, I bought my first lathe. Okay. And then it was downhill from there. And I mean that in a very good way. A snowball turning into a giant avalanche. And so turning wood, you put a piece of wood on a lathe and it turns, and you use your chisel. And this is all very rudimentary and very, just explaining it, but you're cutting the wood away to the shape that you want. And it was very therapeutic. And I got very hooked right off the bat. And that, the wood turning has really been the absolute best PTSD therapy for me.
So if I'm hearing you right, you had some serious PTSD, came on by surprise, changed your life completely, took everything out from under your feet, basically.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you had to rewrite your life. In doing that, at some point you said cribbage boards would be fun. And it sounds like there's a little bit of therapy even in making cribbage boards.
Yes, there absolutely was. And with the epoxy work, it allowed us to take a pretty piece of wood with cracks, live edge, with imperfections, fill it with the epoxy, and we're able to, we've got 6 or 7 dozen different colors of mica pigment. And so the playing with all the different colors, and tinting it to match something, that artistic aspect of it was really fun because then you mate the color with epoxy to either complement or contrast.
You said it's therapeutic.
Yes.
More than building costumes, more than working on cars.
It is, because you take a rough block and you're controlling how that is shaping, and so you look at like potters, they're taking a lump of clay and potters and wood turning are very similar. The difference being with a ceramics, you're adding material and you're going vertical. Whereas with wood, you're removing material and you're going horizontal. And so as I'm making my chisel passes, it's, I'm starting to see what I want to do with that piece. And then you start to see it emerging out. And then by the time you're done, you're like, I did that. I made that. And then you can step back and say, wow, I've done something. And you can have that moment of pride that you made something, and I consider myself to be extremely blessed with all the opportunities I've had. God has definitely blessed my hands to be able to do this.
Yeah.
My wife and I, our signature series is our fragmented series. And so we've worked with epoxy. My wife does a lot of our carving. She does a lot of spoons. And then she's taken a lot of my turned pieces and added stuff to them. And so with turning, epoxy work, and carving, we've done all three of those, but we've never done them together as one. And so about 2.5 years ago, Beth had the idea of doing a stained glass inspired piece, turning the bottom of a piece, carving a design in it, filling it with epoxy. And then once it's cured, put it back on the lathe, true up the outside, flip it around, and then hollow it out. And so what you're essentially filling with your epoxy is a 5-sided box, albeit curves and whatnot in it. And then you turn away the bottom of that essentially, which is the inside of the bowl or the platter. And so our son came up with that name, Fragment, because it's stained glass inspired, but stained glass has a religious connotation to it. And so although we're Christians, we didn't necessarily want to segregate a potential client by adding that. So we asked our son, well, what would you do? What would you name it? And he said fragmented, because when light passes through a prism, it fragments out into Roy G. Biv, the 7 colors of the rainbow. And it was perfect. And so we named that after him. And then individually, myself, I have my cardioforms. They are multi-axis. They are double mouth holoforms. I actually have one on the lathe that I started yesterday. And so quite a process. And a holoform is a vessel that has a smaller mouth than the overall size of the piece. And so it takes specialty gooseneck shaped tools to get in there underneath. And so by taking the different classes I've had, it has allowed me to expand artistically and to create something that is not many people are doing.
I guess that'd be kind of hard in the woodworking space
So
to do something unique.
It was funny. In September of 24, it was my first symposium that I attended. And my wife and I, we had just finished up our piece, our first fragmented. And so 2 different blues, a green and a yellow. And it looks like a mosaic. And so I brought it down there because you're allowed to bring a couple pieces for the instant gallery to let everybody see your work. And one of the main headliners was Jack Vestry. And so I got to meet Jack Vestry. He's in the Smithsonian as a sculptor of wood. Wow. And so, I mean, that's a pretty huge accomplishment for him. And then he did a critique on our piece in front of 300 or so people.
Oh, wow.
And
it's got to be nerve-wracking.
So, yeah, and everything he said was positive. And the only thing that was a suggestion was we have a brand that we use, an actual brand. We heat it up with a little torch, and then we put it on the wood. And it's got our logo on it. And so we had that on the back of this, and then we had our names on it as well. And his critique was ditch the brand because it has kind of a production quality to it where these are individual one for one. And so he said, sign it. And it makes sense because you look at a Rembrandt.
You don't have a brand on a Rembrandt?
You don't have a
That's
brand
right.
on him. You have a signature on him. Yeah. And so my wife was like, okay, we'll do that. So she sanded the brand off because it was superficial. And then, so it was really awesome having our signature piece. And Jack Vestry's been in the game for well over 2 decades, going on 3. he had never seen that before.
Wow.
And Jack is not a fan of the epoxy, but he said it was the most ingenious use that he's ever seen. So, when you have someone like that giving you praise on your work and he's never seen it, he's been on just about every continent, teaching, turning, collaborating. And so it was an awesome, awesome experience.
Wow. That's pretty cool. Yeah. What an honor.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah. Tell me about you're going into art. I mean, I'm curious about this, right? You're going into art and you're starting a business while you're doing it.
Yes.
So on one hand, you're getting therapy and it's just a nice hobby. And on the other hand, as you told me earlier, you can only make so many pieces and then your workshop's full of your stuff.
Yes.
And so there had to be a business part of this.
Yes.
What was that like?
And so my wife, she has our single proprietor with our LLC. And so I don't want to get paid for this. I don't. Any opportunity I can get, you were here a couple of weeks ago. We did a little workshop on carving. And so I want to give back to the community. And so I'm not in this for the money. Although I have found out how to be a millionaire when it comes to woodworking. And that's start as a billionaire first.
Yeah.
But, I would just encourage anybody, that wants to start doing wood turning, start off slow, find your kind of niche, find what you want to do, whether it's pens, whether it's candlesticks, platters, bowls, whatnot, and then start at a craft show. And if you essentially level yourself out, start with an art show. And that's one of the biggest things that I wish my wife and I knew the difference of, because we started with every craft show we could here in town back in 2021. And, we were tickled pink when we, had an $80 show.
Yeah.
And so
you sold something, right? You probably broke even.
We sold stuff. In our first show, well, actually that was our second show, we sold a cribbage board, and it was kind of neat. And then we started doing the art shows, and it was night and day difference. You have people that are, $20 to $40 is kind of typical what you want to spend at a craft show. You want to get your doily, you want to get your snacks and goodies. And then if you find something you can't live without, then you get it.
I like that you said doily.
Okay. And then, so as far as the art shows go, it's the clientele it's a different clientele. They want to know the story behind the piece. And so that is really what I love going to the art shows and doing. What can you tell me about this piece? Yeah, so this piece is black locust, which glows under black light. It's a really dense tree. And this one, I carved it into a hollow form vase. I did accent carving, I sandblasted, etc. Whatever I did to that piece, the people want to know that. And so you're not just selling a piece of art, you're selling the story. A lot of times when we go to art shows, a lot of times an artist tends to be kind of, that, and I don't want to characterize, but there's quite a few people that are very much into their art, and that's how they express themselves, and they're introvert. And so, they have a hard time talking about their work. And so for me, I'm an extrovert by default. I was a non-commissioned officer in the Army. I was a sergeant. I gave classes on weapons and whatnot. So I had to speak in front of, anywhere from, 10 to 50 to, 100 plus people. And so that public speaking skills that I was able to hone during my military experience has really allowed me to be able to articulate my process. And it's always the best. Can you tell me about this, as long as it's not a trade secret? It's like there's no such thing as trade secrets in this. Everything has been done before. It's just whether you take in this component, that component, mash it together. And so, creating a different process. But I love talking about what I do. Wood is my passion, and I love getting people involved in this.
There's a transition that almost every artist or business person which I feel like are closely correlated, or maybe the same thing. Although I don't know if artists would want to be lumped in the same room, but you have to put yourself out there and say, hey, look at this. I made this. I made this, and then people will have to say yes. And there's a personal value that's attached to that. So you went from not making anything really, except for you said 2x4s, right? Just real rough cuts, right? To making craft show stuff in quotes. I'm not saying it was that quality. I'm just saying that's where you sold it at. And then you also have to transition to art.
Yes.
What is that as an artist, or even zero to craft fair? What is that like to say, hey, here is me?
You really have to open yourself up and be vulnerable. In all walks of life, honesty is huge. And when you're talking to a potential client, they can key in on whether you're, just kind of giving them fluff or you're actually working through the process. And it is very vulnerable because you're opening yourself up. This is what you do. This is your passion. And so there's the people that they look and they'll look at the price tag and they'll walk away. And it's like, you have to have thick skin in this game. You
just said you have to be vulnerable. And then you said you have to have thick skin.
You have to be vulnerable because you have to open up to your client. You have to, like I said, you're not just selling a piece of art, you're selling yourself. They want to know your story. You have to have thick skin because not everybody that walks into your booth is going to buy it. And then you get a couple people that, they're having a bad day, and regardless of what you say, everything is wrong. And then it's like, oh, okay, have a great day.
Yeah. They always exist.
They do. And, that's been the few.
Yeah.
And luckily, everybody is very, encouraged, and they like seeing what you have, and they love hearing it, because if you're talking your process, what they perceive to be trade secrets, and they're like, this guy just told me all what he does. And so it's nice being able to see the reaction, because you get that genuine human connection.
I'm guessing if I asked you the question, have you ever wanted to give this up? You'd say never.
No, I can.
Okay.
Yes. So in 23, my wife and I decided we wanted to get into Colorado, and we wanted to get to more of the art shows.
Okay.
And so we had 8 or so shows booked. And so we've got the kitchen style wire racks in our office, and that's where we keep our product when we're not at a show. And so we had divided it up: Jackson, Omaha, Steamboat, just setting it up. And I had a list of, I want 1 to 3 large salad bowls, 8 smaller food safe bowls. I wanted to have this many art pieces, et cetera. Yeah. And I got really burnt out because it put me into a production mindset. I had to get this many on my self-imposed quota. Okay. And so Beth could see it. She could see I was burning out. I could feel it. And so she had to flat out tell me, stop what you're doing and make what you want. And so we went to Boulder for the Pearl Street Arts Market, and I had 5 hybrid bowls, wood and epoxy, and 2 of them sold. The 2 that sold, one of them was a cottonwood burl and epoxy that I was really excited about making. Okay. And then the other one, a friend of mine from Fort Collins, she was having trouble, and she had asked online, what do you do? And I said, I do this and I do this. Oh, by the way, if you want to come up, I'll turn a bowl from start to finish. And so that bowl sold. Oh, wow. So it was 2 bowls that I was excited on doing. They sold. And the other 3, they eventually sold, but it just goes to illustrate that doing what you love and you're passionate about is much more important than the production value. And there's production turners out there, and they'll crank out several bowls a day. I undiagnosed ADHD, and so I bounce around with a lot of different stuff. And so for me, instead of having a regimented work schedule and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I come in here, I grab whatever I feel like making, and ultimately that's what gets finished and then winds up going to a show. So yeah, in 23, I was getting really burnt out.
Gotcha.
And so that was the closest I got.
And so you had to learn to almost come back to where you started. Just, I want to do this. Money doesn't matter. This is fun.
Exactly. And so it was a good opportunity for me to kind of reevaluate what I wanted to do this for. I was getting almost to the point where money was taking more priority than my own therapy. And so once I kind of backtracked and got to what I was wanting to do, things kind of alleviated the situation.
That's really cool. I like how you, essentially, as you just said, your own therapy ends up winning, right?
Yes.
That was pretty cool. And a good lesson, really.
Yes. It was a hard lesson to learn, but ultimately it was so very beneficial.
Yeah, it's cool. If you were to, why do you think you do this? You said therapy, for sure.
Yes.
Sure. But if you were like, what's your core motivation?
Let me think about that. Like I said, working with my dad, it was complete function over form. It was 2x4s and plywood. And, my wife and I, we built bunk beds for the kids. But as you grow, you naturally want to evolve. You want to do better. You want to continuously strive, for perfection, although we will never, ever attain that. And so that desire to really want to keep going. And once I started turning, I kind of just picked up my lathe on a whim. I was following a bunch of different folks on Instagram, and they really seemed to be enjoying what they were doing. And so I bought mine, and I loved it. And so it's taking a rough block of wood and turning it into something, pun intended.
That's cool. Okay. So it's the transformation.
It is. It's really looking at a rough block, and then whether it becomes a bowl, a vase, or whatever kind of finished product is going to be, it's enjoying the process of going through all of it.
What are you most proud of? It's one of the most, like, if you were just to I'm so proud of, it could be the art piece. It also could be what you did with it, the transition there, or just even a personal.
That's a multifaceted question, to be honest. The fact that I am using this to overcome my PTSD, that's huge. My wife, she is an amazing carver. Some of the stuff that she has done is just mind-blowing. The fact that we have some signature pieces, in the world of wood turning where everything has been done. And if you can find something that has not been done or is only done by a handful of people, it's that moment of, wow, God has blessed me and guided me to where I'm at right now.
Really enjoyed the story. He has just making a business, but it's not a business. It's like therapy, but like he said, like, it's not about the making money. It's about doing the stuff he loves and kind of like making it so he can do the stuff he loves more. I don't feel like that kind of passion for businesses is really always there. It can be easy to start out that way, but to keep doing something that is your passion and keeping it as a passion and also figuring out how to make that into a business. And because he's, he constantly was like, I'm going to make sure to keep this a passion. I'm not going to go to a bunch of fairs because then it will scale it too much and it won't be a passion. Like keeping that as the forerunning like goal. I I feel like we need more of that, and more businesses that are fueled by passion and love, and that are healing for us, but also helps us and helps other people.
I just talked about that concept on the newsletter recently, how when sometimes we feel like we're forced to make compromises in business or just in life, you know. In fact, we just talked to Murad, who'll be coming on the podcast later, and I was having coffee with him one time, and we asked him how come he was promoted so much faster than the people around him, because I know he was near some great employees, but for some reason he was promoted above them. And they would say, well, if I was a manager, then I'm going to have to compromise this or compromise that, and I'm going to have to do this and do that. He's like, look, I was promoted and I didn't have to make those compromises.
Yeah.
He never said it was easy, but he did say he still had a sense of agency in the middle of it. And for some reason, we all have these excuses in our head, like, well, if I do this, I'm going to have to.
Yeah.
If I start a business, I hear this one all the time. If I start a business, then I'm going to have to sacrifice my family.
Yeah.
Or, which I would say is just the opposite, right? But no matter what you do, like, we just have to retain our sense of control. And that's essentially epitomized, because he was like, I'm not doing this for money. And so therefore, he retained that sense of control. We could really, really use that.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can't control everything in life, but we do have agency. We're way more in charge than we think we are.
Yeah, for sure.
And so are you. So until then, my friends, happy sailing.